welcome to the OEL or webinar series. We're presenting from the OEL faculty. Yesterday, we had Dr. Rachel Boating, who presented investing in women in outdoor ministry, and that was a recorded session. So if you're interested, you can reach out to us and we can get that to you. And then today we have Dr. Rob Reeby, and he's presenting on staff onboarding, training, and retention. And then tomorrow at the same time, I will be presenting. My name is Mohe Akarenjahi, and my presentation will be on cultural engagement. Before I hand over to Rob, let me pray for us. Lord, we are just thankful for the opportunity to partner together in ministry, camp ministry. We thank you for the opportunity to also gather from different continents and different parts of the world and even of the country. And we pray that, Father, as we spend time reflecting, learning, that you'd open our hearts to one another and to yourself as you speak to us. So we just commend our time to you now, in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. All right, so just before Rob begins, just make sure that you stay muted. And if you have questions, you can put them on the chat. We'll keep an eye on the chat, and at the appropriate time, then Rob will address the questions. So over to you, Rob.
Awesome. Well, it's great to have you all with us. Thanks to those that are joining us live, and then those that are viewing this later. Really excited to talk with you about the topic today. This is going to be a webinar, and I'm planning to kind of move very, very quickly over some big ideas, realizing that in 1 hour it's not really possible to go into depth. So this is more, in my mind, about stimulating thinking that hopefully results in ongoing conversation after the webinar, both with your teams where you are, and then maybe with us or globally, however that might be. I'm really excited. We have a few other countries represented. It'll be interesting to see if what we're talking about here in our context is relevant to your context. So let's get rolling. About halfway through, I have a pause point where we'll be able to deal with questions from kind of the first part, and then we'll continue on and deal with the second half of questions in the last 10 minutes or so. So here's kind of the view of what we're going to do. We're going to review the current moment, specifically as it relates to staff, and I'm thinking here of seasonal staff, summer staff. I'm going to ask a big question, and then I'm going to propose maybe a different solution. Maybe it's something that many of you are already doing, but my general sense is that it is a different way forward than we have generally practiced Christian camping. So here's the current moment. We have a very significant challenge. It seems, at least in our context, U.S. context, that camper enrollment and interest is climbing, maybe as a response to COVID, and that equally camper needs and challenges, call it emotional intelligence or emotional issues, spiritual, relational, educational, because of COVID and all of those factors, their camper needs and challenges are increasing, but at the same time, the quality and quantity of staff is decreasing. So I picked this picture because what I see is 4 tracks coming together and all converging at one place. And what we have, in my sense, and especially traveling around and talking to a lot of camp professionals, is with camper enrollment going up and the staff challenge going down, we're coming to a significant crisis. Now, most of the time when I talk about this, I have 20 slides of statistics that kind of prove this point. For today, I'm just going to assume that this is where we're at and ask a big question. Is this moment that we're in with this potential convergence of challenge, a blip, or a cultural shift? In other words, is it just a post-COVID thing and it's going to go away in a year or two? Or is this something that is a shift that may be a 3, 5, 10-year or more kind of situation that we're going to live into? The corollary question is our current model of camp at risk? Meaning the idea of bringing in 18 to 24-year-olds to be the counselors and the staff for the summer season, given where they at and the challenge of getting enough of them with the increased demand in the camp side, is our whole model of how we've done camp at risk. So I'm going to assume, for the sake of our conversation today, that we are in a staffing crisis. Just recently, I was at the Christian Camping 3CA California Sectional Conference, and Greg Hunter, the president of 3CA USA, stood up and he said, "We are in a staffing crisis." So for no other reason, I'm just going to go with Greg Hunter's claim that we are in a staffing crisis. And as I've traveled around and talked to folks, here are some of the ways that I see camps responding to the staffing crisis. Some camps are switching to family camps in the summer. So instead of having youth camps that require a high number of college students, they switch to family camps where the parents are, in a sense, with the kids and you can reduce your staff. I've seen other camps switch to intact groups for the exact same reason. Maybe doing youth camps for half the summer and doing retreat groups for the rest of the time. I've seen staff with camps with multiple sites rotate staff. So they have one group of counseling staff and they're doing 4 weeks of residential camp at this camp while they do family camp at the other one. And then that group of counseling staff goes to the other camp and then the previous one switches to retreats or to families or something like that. So they're changing their approach to summer. Other camps are trying to solve this problem with multiple summer terms. In other words, you'll have 2 sets of staff they hire, one for 6 weeks and another group for 6 weeks. You have to do training twice. You have to recruit twice as many people because you're doubling up. Other camps are recruiting harder, more miles, more people hours out there trying to beat the bushes. Recently, number 6, I talked to a camp that hired a company and has 3 staff on-site permanent professional staff that are doing social media recruiting, and they're getting about 40% of their staff through Facebook ads and such. Other camps are capping beds, meaning we're going to only take half the campers until we have staff, and then if we add a staff member, we'll add a cabin. If we add a staff member, we'll add another cabin. So they're capping camper enrollment until they have the right staff. And then the other thing I've seen quite a bit is staff incentives, where if you finish the summer, we'll give you a bonus. In other words, recruiting staff to come and then finish the summer with a bonus at the end. So those are some of the ways that our camps are changing how they do camp, which to me is significant because in many ways we're leaving the roots, we're leaving maybe the mission and the history and the legacy of a camp and doing new things. And is it more out of survival and necessity than out of a missional drive? And to me, whenever that happens, I get concerned. Here's another piece of info just to what's happening with camps. This comes from CampMinder, which is kind of a marketing research group who in 2021 surveyed a bunch of camps, not just Christian, but all camps US. And here's where camps find staff. And you'll notice that 31% third-party staffing partners. So in other words, a recruiting agency that's helping to bring staff to camp. Online job boards, search engines, and then the other 3. If you look at it this way, the green are out there finding new people. The yellow are recruiting from people that are already inside camp. But what's interesting about this is 41% are recruiting through relationships that they have. 59 are trying to find staff by going after unknown new people to fill the funnel. My question then is, are we trying to address the staffing crisis with the wrong solution? In other words, more outsider, new people that we don't know, that don't know our ministry, than people on the inside. And this leads to the big question, which is, do we need a paradigm shift? At this point, I often ask the question of camp leaders in the room, please finish the sentence. Camp is for the, and the response is usually, with a loud resounding voice of unity, the camper. And so the paradigm shift that I want to call us to is to put staff development first. To put staff development first. And many camps will say, oh, it's 50-50. We put as much towards staff as we do to camper. But hopefully through the course of this webinar and this conversation, that you'll see that if we truly put staff first, a lot has to change. But let's ask the question, why do we prioritize, or why should we prioritize staff development? After we talk about this, we'll get into what does it look like to prioritize staff development and what have to change. So why? First of all, staff impact the campers. So if you develop your staff, hopefully they're more mature, more equipped, ready to impact the campers and are going to do so better. If you invest in staff development, they grow, they have good experiences, they're likely to return, solving in some ways that staff challenge because you have more people coming back and hopefully bringing people that are like them to help you fill your place. If you invest in staff, it improves their maturity and their readiness for ministry, which is a huge impact just on them as individuals. It's improving their long-term employability and contribution beyond camp. So in a sense, we're using camp to equip them for life. We're fully utilizing the fantastic leadership development laboratory of our camp settings. We have an amazing tool to do this. And when we make this switch, we're maximizing on that tool. Parents love it. It's interesting that oftentimes I've heard people say, well, if we focus on staff development, the camper parents are going to be nervous because their kids aren't the focus. Well, actually, what we found is that if you say we invest in staff development, here's why, and here's how, and what does this look like, parents love it because they know they're getting a better quality leader for their kids. Next reason is because I think it's what Jesus did. Jesus had a ministry to the masses, to the many, there where he was healing and teaching and preaching. But as we know, he had a small group that he deeply invested that he called to be with them. And in a sense, our ministry to the staff is modeling what Jesus did. The other reason to prioritize staff development, it's why they work, and it's what they need. The National Association of Colleges and Employers, and this is an association that links employers and colleges and trying to fill the employment pipeline. They are people that really push internships. If you go to their website, they're going to have a whole structure of how organizations and businesses should do internships with colleges, what the benefit is, what that looks like. But one of their recent surveys with today's emerging adults, as far as what do they want from a career, you'll notice personal development and community is at the top. The third reason, or what draws them to work, is passion, something that connects with their heart. It has a missional value. Job security and compensation are at the lower level. And why that star is there is because when this study was done in the late teens, this was the first time compensation had been at the bottom. So the first generation. To support this, here's results from a study done by Jacob Sorensen, Sacred Playgrounds, 50 camps, 880 staff. It was a summer staff project. 2021. Why do they work? Notice the top two: to experience community, make friends, to have fun. And at the bottom is to make money. In between, you have those missional reasons. So in many ways, this chart parallels what we just saw from the National Association. On the flip side, this is kind of studies on staffing, grabbing the things that seem to be pitfalls or concerns or some of the common reputation things that camps have relative to summer employment. Is there's long hours, minimal breaks, no reflection, poor management and supervision, challenging relationships among peers. So in other words, there's peer conflict and challenge. It's not a real job. One of the main reasons that you often hear when people say, I can't work at camp this summer, is because I have to get a real job. So there's this perception that working at camp somehow is not a real job. And then we're also very well known for low pay. And I don't think that we can compete in the pay department with even McDonald's now that's paying $20 an hour or more. And that's not even significant. I mean, it is a significant real job, but you can make more working in other places. So if we can't compete in compensation, then I think we need to be remarkable in everything else. So the bottom line, in my thinking, is that we need to shift to prioritize staff development. This is where I kind of want to pause and get a 2 or 3 minute reaction. Agree, disagree? Are you seeing this in Canada and Argentina? Is this a situation, a crisis that we're feeling in the broader camp movement and even outside our setting here in Wisconsin? Thoughts? Invite a few people to comment. Any questions about any of that?
I was chatting.
We have a thought here from Hume New England. If you can hear us, cool. I would say for us, we're experiencing some of that here. Our focus is very intense on camper evangelism. One of our mission state bullet points, however, is discipleship. So that's something that we're slowly trying to push, a discipleship model for our staff and evangelism for our camper experience. So
yeah, but it is something that we think about a lot with retention is we have like a lack of like everybody essentially works the same hours, kind of has really similar jobs. And so it's like, how can we retain staff by giving perks for like staying longer that like can't include pay and they can't include like some of these like tangible things, but it's like, what are things that we can add to your experience that would like incentivize you to stay longer, even if even if that can't be like financial compensation. So it's like it's something that we're like dipping our toes into and we're seeing benefits of with our staff that we're retaining. But it's the like, how do you do those things well is just something we're still working on.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks. Other thoughts? Someone chat.
I can say something. This is not super relevant to Christian camping specifically. I work at a climbing gym. I'm the youth programs director at First Ascent in Chicago. And some of the things that you're saying are like also true of like just the outdoor industry in general. Like I'm noticing the same things of like I'm working with college students. This is not their main job. They're not they're not doing it because they're making a lot of money. They're doing it because they love kids or because they want to be there. They want to be in the outdoor industry. And so my comment is that it's very similar across the Board of Outdoor Education. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for that. And we've heard the phrase the Great Resignation, which was happening before COVID, and COVID accelerated. And what's happening now? Is there a little bit of a bounce back? But the fact that that's even in our cultural language of I'm just not going to engage, or my engagement's going to be kind of half-hearted. There's definitely something going on there just with the whole employment world, not just in camp. So thanks for that. Well, let's press in. If prioritizing staff development is something we need to do and to focus on, how do we do it? And the phrase I love is, how do we create the conditions in our environments where we're responsible for development to happen? In 2019, we did a study of 27 camps across the US. It was a staff study, so we did a pre-test at the beginning of summer and then another at the end of summer. And one of the questions or things that we pressed into is, will you return to camp and work there? Yes, no, or maybe. If they said yes, then we correlated it with other aspects of the summer and found that these things listed here on this slide potentially contribute to this idea of return. My thinking is that this is where staff felt the impact. This is where they felt there was a connection. So a couple things you'll notice, and this is of a long list of other factors where we said, how much time did you get with your supervisor? What was your end of summer state of being? And there was many factors. So the ones that are on the screen were the ones that arose from all these other factors. So first of all, supervision is that they had perceived support from peers, coworkers, and supervisors. So they felt supported, they felt known. Number two is that there was a frequency of meetings with peers and coworkers. And notice this is a peer one, which I have another slide on this from our survey that we'll show you in a minute, that the role of peers and coworkers in the summer experience is very significant. End of summer state of being, that there was spiritual growth. So the fact that they grew spiritually, of course, that logically says, well, I might want to come back here because something happened in me. Team health, there was good conflict resolution, there was getting along with coworkers, there was health of staff team. That helped you want to come back, which again, this is totally logical, because if you're in conflict and your teams are, tense, it's not fun, it's draining you, it's going to contribute to it not being a good experience. So the role of a healthy team and us making sure that's part of our cultures is critical for impact and return. And then lastly, and this really connects with back to why people work, that sense of mission and passion. You'll notice that they want to be connected with mission. They want to return when they feel connected to the mission, that their role is significant, and that their standards of performance are clear and known. So they know when they're doing their job well, which either comes from the environment reinforcing it or from feedback from people who are watching, be that supervisors or others. To me, this one's really critical for the 30 to 40% of staff at every camp that are not the counselors. Because oftentimes the people on the front lines with the kids are doing the mission, and everybody else we call support staff. In other words, you're supporting the mission, you're not necessarily doing the mission. And so I really challenge camps to not use that phrase, to use something like specialty staff or some other way that helps them when they're not directly working with campers to know that they are critical to the mission. So here are the 6 things that I'm going to run through really fast in the next 15, 20 minutes that in and of themselves are a seminar, but want to give an overview of what I think this idea of switching to staff development as our priority will require if we want to move in this direction, where the real paradigm shift has to come. So we're going to talk about growing your own, moving from training to onboarding, clarity, and how do we create clarity, back to the last slide, where they want to know that what they're doing is contributing to mission and know when they're successful. What does support and supervision look like? How do we foster healthy community and peer relationships? And then what are we recruiting them to? And what is the language we use to recruit people to camp? So these are the 6 different sections that are coming. So first of all, growing your own. First of all, there's the camper progression. So this slide, which is really small, you can't see it, but what it represents is a very purposeful camper program progression that grows campers through from one level of maturity to another. The idea being that a one-time experience at camp may have an impact, but if you can build your programs to grow, to increase in challenge with the child over their whole development all the way through high school and get them to come back year after year, you're growing your own, because a percentage of them will want to come back and be on staff when they're in college. So an example of this is just our wilderness trips, which is represented by the little campfire on here. For our youngest kids, they don't go on wilderness trips. For res camp, which is 4th to 8th graders, it's 1 to 2 nights. Advanced camp is 9th graders, 4 to 5 nights. 222 is our 10th to 11th grade program, 7 to 9 nights. So you can see that as they progress through the program, the challenge, the responsibility, the service opportunities, the role that they play in taking personal responsibility for their spiritual formation increases as they grow in maturity. So that's growing your own camper-wise. This represents growing your own with a staff development pipeline that parallels what I just showed on camper. So you can see there's level 1, level 2, level 3 represented by each of these different movements. And the idea is that if a student comes back for a second or a third year, that we're increasing the challenge, responsibility, training, skills that they're learning, scope of responsibility as they move through our staff programs. If this progression is laid out and there's a clear sense of what you gain from a developmental standpoint, if you hang with the progression in itself draws people back and allows us to develop and invest in them over multiple years. This pipeline here is a larger camp. Some camps may only have a 3-step developmental process. Other camps might have a 5-step developmental process, but it's basically thinking through the roles of your camp and identifying roles that increase responsibility and stretch. So it may be going from site facility staff to counseling to being a unit leader, which is over a group of counselors and part of a program, and progressing through. So that's growing your own from the staff side and creating a system where 2 or 3 or 4 years of developmental opportunities are laid out in front of them. Another way to grow your own is through school year programming. So a lot of camps have started gap year programs for kids between high school and college that aren't ready or don't want to go to college yet. So they'll come to camp for a year. Well, what's cool is that group of of gap year students, a big chunk of them can come and be part of your summer staff. And then you're getting 10 months of development and investment as they prepare to minister in the summer. At HoneyRock, we created a post-college gap year. We call it HoneyRock Fellows. A lot of camps have internship year for students after college. Again, this allows them to come for a whole year. You're investing and developing in them, and then they're continuing on in the summer. So in a sense, you're growing your own through a school year program. Online or location-based investment. So seeing a lot more camps doing online workshops and connection things, or a staff retreat in February or October that brings the staff back from summer, gets them reconnected with each other, reinvested in, re-inspired, and sends them back, which is where retreats come in. And maybe there's other ways, but it seems to me that if we can take a lot of the time that we're investing and going on the road and recruiting people we don't know, if we can shift that effort in some respects to investing in the people we already have through these different means, online, retreats, whatever it might, going to them, it will bring people back and make our ministry more than just a few weeks in the summer. So those are the grow your own ideas that stretch us to think about investing in staff, not just as a one-time summer only process. The second shift that I encourage us to think about is this onboarding instead of training. So onboarding, successful onboarding is made up of these 4 factors, and we don't have a ton of time to press into those. But the difference between onboarding and training is that when we think of training in camp ministry, we usually think of the 5 to 10 days at the beginning of summer. And what we're encouraging people to think about is onboarding as a process that happens over many months, that begins with the first inquiry or conversation about coming for summer, all the way through the hiring, application, selection, contracting process through the summer and then beyond. And here's an example of what we mean by that. So you'll notice we have the pre-arrival onboarding. So that's every conversation and communication before they arrive. The early days with first day, first week, and then training being huge. So that's where the training box fits in that we usually focus on. But then onboarding continues all the way through the summer experience, highlighting the transition out at the end of summer as learning, growth, development, coaching throughout the summer process, with the mindset that it's not just about summer. So in other words, if we treat onboarding as a whole process through the entirety summer all the way to the end, we're actually onboarding them for the next year and the next year after that. So it's having a developmental connecting mindset all the way through the process of bringing people in, with training being one condensed, intense, immersive piece of that. So that's onboarding. And basically the challenge here is to think about bringing people into our organization, not just as a 2-week training thing, but as a process that spans months and involves multiple pieces of communication. As I'm rolling here, if you have questions at any moment, please put them in the chat and we'll come back to them when we have the space at the end. After onboarding is this whole idea of supervision and support. So in the onboarding, I talked about coaching and how do we walk with people through the summer. And personally, this is where I think a lot of the challenge comes for us in Christian camping, because once the kids come, we as the people running camp and the people that are even seasonal in the summer that are responsible for aspects of programming are so busy running the program, so busy solving the crises that are a result just from having kids around, that we cease to invest in the staff. And so here are a few ways that we can invest in staff that, again, any one of these is an in-depth conversation, but I'll just run over them briefly to kind of expand the mindset and get us thinking differently. So first of all is opportunity. Our camps are full of opportunities for people to take responsibility in areas they haven't done before, which requires risk on our part. But that opportunity stretches them and grows them. The challenge, down to the 6th bullet point on this slide, is that we have so many experiences that stretch and grow our people, but we don't take time to reflect on it. We don't take time to help them name what the learning has been and what the challenge was and what the mistakes were, and how can they learn from those. So purposeful, facilitated reflection and making that part of the DNA of the culture is key for all these learning experiences to be meaningful and valuable. Training is kind of obvious when we are purposely training people in skills, or different aspects of the role we're developing in them. So that's a logical one that we all already do. The next one, goal setting, is a question of, is there a purposeful process early in the summer where we help our people, our staff, think through growth goals for the summer? 1 or 2 or 3 spiritual, professional, personal goals that they enter summer purposely pursuing, having named and having shared with other people. The research shows that if you have a goal and you share it with people, it actually increases the probability that you're going to accomplish the goal. So what we try to do is facilitate a process of goal setting, share that with the peers, share that with your supervisor, and then throughout the summer, there's feedback conversations where there's reflection on how's that goal going. This feedback one-on-ones, we call them, are times where there's conversation about what's going well, what's not going well, what are you learning, where are you being stretched, how can I help? And there's a very purposeful process of reflecting on development as they roll through the summer. The third, or the next area of support and supervision, is using transitions. One of the things I love about camp ministry is that over the course of the summer, we have a week or a 2-week program. We have a short break, and then we get to do it again, and then we get to do it again. And if it's a 1-week program, we may have 5, 6, 7 of these reps a summer. So how do we take advantage of the breaks in between for reflection and refreshment? Do we pause and say, okay, what worked well in that session? What do we need to change? What do you need to change? What were challenges for you, and how can we equip you to try and do better and learn and grow in the next session? So we have these sessions, but so often I see camps end on Saturday morning, spend 3 hours cleaning, and the next group comes 3 in the afternoon. There's been very little reflection. There's been very little rest. So how do we build that into our schedule? And this is where, if we are going to prioritize staff development, maybe we have to change our schedules. When I became program director back in the early 90s at HoneyRock, camp ended on Saturday. It was all day work Saturday, worship on Sunday morning as a community, and then get back to work after lunch on Sunday to be ready for camper arrival on Monday. One of the first things, that's when I was doing 3 years of summer staff. One of the first things I did when I had the authority to make change was I ended camp on Friday. Get all the work done of cleanup, reflection, group processing on Friday, get Saturday and Sunday off until Sunday night, 6 o'clock. Campers come at the end of the day on Monday. The goal being, provide some break, but provide purposeful times of reflection in there. What that means for HoneyRock is 3 or 4 times a summer, there's no residential overnight kids for 2 or 3 nights, which means 12 empty nights a summer, which is crazy. But if you're prioritizing staff, that's what you're going to do. So that's for our junior high and elementary age kids. High school kids are here longer. We have to do it in different ways. But that's transitions, and how do we capitalize on those? Okay, now to peers. We saw in that why do they return that peers and coworkers are huge. This chart blows me away. This again is from our 2019 study. And you'll notice the question is, what was the primary source of impact on your summer? 56.8% said their peers. That's over training, job-related experience, supervision, supervisors, outdoors, Bible teaching, and other. The peers are a huge part of the summer experience. So how do we facilitate that peer-to-peer ministry? We'll talk about some of those ideas here in a minute. So here's kind of the main slide. This is where we kind of get close to ending. What needs to change if we want to have a culture of development for our staff and make that the priority? Here's my answers. First of all, make sure there's time off for rest and reflection. Adequate time. What is adequate time? Tough call. Got to assess that in your situation. But the challenge is we don't just give time off. We have to teach our staff how to use it. Because a lot of times in camp, you get a day off, you stay up till 3 a.m. having fun, you run around, you're doing 50 million things, and you don't take any time for rest and reflection. I remember when I worked in camp in high school, our bedtime on average was 3 a.m. the entire summer long, and we had to be at work at 7 a.m. because we were having too much fun. So how do we teach people to have time off, to sleep, to care for themselves? We can't assume they will use the time wisely. Secondly is unit leaders. So at HoneyRock, we have unit leader, and unit leaders are across the organization. So the kitchen has a unit leader, site facilities, and the specialty staff side have unit leaders, ACT staff, counts. And basically a unit leader is a counselor to the counselors. So every group of 6 to 10 college-age staff has a counselor that's a summer staff person that's responsible for them. These are the people that meet with them every other week, do the one-on-ones, facilitate the goal setting, check in with them regularly, and are responsible for the care and development of the summer staff over the course of the whole summer. What this requires is inserting a whole nother level of staff into our organization and training them to be counselors of counselors. So it's a unique training for that level of group. Another potential area is purposeful development and coaching, which I talked about with the goal setting and the check-ins. Being very purposeful about the teams, getting to that, the role of peers and the role of teams in the summer experience and in the impact of summer. So each of those unit leaders has a group of 6 to 8 summer staff they're responsible for. Well, that is a team. And when there's a break from camp, there's reflection, there's pausing, there's getting away with that group, celebrating what God's done, encouraging and supporting and praying for each other. We also have a thing we call running partners, where we encourage all staff to pair up with somebody that they are going to run the summer race with. And it doesn't mean like physically go running every day. It just means this is your prayer partner, your buddy for summer, and you're going to support and encourage each other. And the cool thing about being purposeful about setting up running partners at the beginning of summer and sharing with the whole community and providing guidelines and tips on how to do running partners is you're basically capitalizing on that positive peer support and channeling it in a direction that results in support and encouragement for the individuals on staff. How do we invest in staff? Well, more staff. Unfortunately, if you're taking and making a major investment in your staff in the summer, you have to add people that are going to help you care for the staff. It is really hard to be 100% camper and be 100% staff or be 50-50. You have to bring in people that are trained and with the focus of staff care. So an example for that at HoneyRock is Camp Pastor. Most of the time when you think camp pastor, most camps will bring in camp pastors, and they're the people that are providing the talks for the campers or the family campers or whatever it might be. At HoneyRock, we have a camp pastor that is just for the staff. They hardly ever talk to campers. They'll get called into a cabin to do a question and answer time, or if one particular high school cabin is struggling with a big question, theology or something, the camp pastor might be called to facilitate that. But the primary focus of the camp pastor is the staff. They're available to shepherd, to meet one-on-one. They're the ones that provide some devos, preach Sunday morning at the staff worship service for all the people that aren't with campers. But the Camp Pastor program has been huge. And one of the things I love about this is it's all volunteer. They come for 2 weeks at a time. And we have pastors that come back year after year after year. So they become part of the progression of people that are coming back year after year. And it's a camp pastor who somebody knows from last year, and they're re-meeting and growing together. So it's been a really powerful part of the program, and we have pastors lining up to do this job. So the camp pastor idea. The other thing that's a benefit to the camp pastor idea is they're not part of the supervisory staff. So they're kind of outside the boss structure, which allows them to have conversations that people might be afraid to talk to their supervisor about. If we want to emphasize development, we may need to make our training longer. The average camp training we found is around 10 days. And is that enough time to prepare them to do the job and to be able to set them up for a developmental growth producing summer? And then the last thing that we've worked on at HoneyRock that may be an idea for other settings is thinking about summer not as a job, but as a leadership school or a disciple making school for the staff, and even calling it that. Because if they're coming into a disciple making school for staff, and that mindset and that mission and that focus is communicated from the front and followed through through a lot of these other things we've talked about today, it changes the focus and the motivation of the staff as they're experiencing it. It's more than just a job. It's about my development, my growth in Christ and otherwise. So those are just some of the ways that when we've thought about this idea of how do we shift to a culture of staff development, some of the changes that we've had to make over time. So I'll put that list of this kind of the buckets that we just ran through really quickly up and pause here for about 10 minutes of questions, comments, thoughts. Would love to engage everybody here for a few minutes. Reactions, questions.
Hi, my name is Sam Craig. I'm coming from Wenham, Mass, from the Levita program here at Gordon College. One of my questions that, one, I love, thank you so much, Rob. Lots of good things. I run our day camp program in the summer here, and one of the problems I've seen, we have a similar staff development model, and I'd be curious to kind of pick your brain about this. Of you have a cohort of kind of your leadership team. So recently I had a big cohort of about 8 people, and then they graduated all around the same time and have now moved on to the next thing. So now I hire about 30 staff. So that's a third of my staff have sort of, transitioned into the next thing. Do you have any ideas of like how staff development could maybe more well balance a big shift like that, or what you've done in the past to sort of find the new staff to fill that hole?
Yeah, and so the 8 that left they were more on the leadership side. Is that what you said?
Yeah, they were the higher up, like the counselor to counselor, and then now it's like, and it's a younger staff, so it's kind of, it was like a big wave. There wasn't that like in between returner.
Yeah, that isn't that the fun challenge of college ministry, is that every year you lose your seniors, quote unquote, which are the experienced ones that are 25% or whatever. This is where I think that leadership pipeline is really important. And if you have a very purposeful process of development and you're using, especially in your setting, if a lot of the students are at Gordon, I'm assuming you're doing things throughout the year. It's not just a summer focused deal. It's like, can you be always filling the pipeline step by step with new training and enhanced training? The other thing that I would wonder, and I'm sure you've thought of this, but is as people leave, part of the challenge is they have to replace themselves, not just body, but role. So it's like, how do you have the idea of succession? You know, we often think when the executive director or the president of a college leaves, there's a succession plan. It's like succession planning should happen at every level of an organization. So if somebody's getting ready to graduate, who are they having walk with them through that whole last year so that when they walk out of the door, that person steps into their spot? So succession planning, and how do you put the responsibility of replacing yourself developmentally and body, have that be part of what you're equipping them in, because that's going to be something that is going to be a really valuable life tool even after they leave your program. That makes sense?
Thank you. Yeah, no, thank you so much. That's helpful.
Thanks, Sam. Great question. Other questions, thoughts?
In my case, I don't know if it is a question of a thought, but I found myself very young to discuss this with my supervisors at camp, because in my country it's very common that camps are organized by church. So I feel like we need to review a lot of things, especially with the staff, because it's like we all know each other, and we sometimes there is like competitions between roles. And I got the opportunity to work at HoneyRock last year, and I found like a very new perspective, or this is why we need to review these things. And as a part of a camp here in my country, I feel like we need rest and reflection, and like to find someone to follow us during the summer. And yeah, I really, it's my prayer that I can be that answer, and bring that new perspective to camps here in Argentina. But sometimes it's kind of difficult because they don't have the same experience that I had, and culture is totally different. And yeah, so that's what I've been thinking.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that perspective.
You have a question from Joshua on the chat.
Yeah, what is it?
The question is, hi everyone, Joshua from La Vida. I was wondering about logistics management for running partners. Do you pick the pairings for the staff?
Great question. Do we pick? No, generally we provide the structure and the vision, and then encourage the staff to take care of it themselves. If people are struggling to find running partners for whatever reason, then we would help facilitate. But generally speaking, we let them kind of work that out through affinity and connection that way. And then, is there accountability? Like, do you have to have one? We'll ask and we'll press, but it's like, we're not going to handcuff you to somebody for the summer. Some groups do it really well and are constantly in touch. Other groups start and then fade. Other groups, it's more light. But for those that take advantage of it, it can be a humongous part of their growth and development over the summer.
Hey, Rob, I got another question here from New England. We have 3 sites that we have with Hume. And so everything has a pipeline for print and marketing and opening up new programs. What wisdom do you have for soft launching discipleship projects, like you're talking about, whether it's we've got Joshua Wilderness Institute for our gap year program, thinking of developing some form of a fellows program, but wondering what wisdom or groundwork we can start to lay in case year one doesn't work out as well as it might. It just doesn't work out well. Just because, we know a lot of marketing and budget stuff go into developing new programs. So what foundations should we be laying for some of those programs?
Are you talking with constituents? Or are you talking internally get support for the idea?
It's a little bit of both.
Well, to me, it seems like there needs to be some pretty strong ownership by the organization for it to be able to take off. Because having this new group of people around can be a challenge. Like, how do we appropriately utilize them and engage them? If the mindset is, oh, sweet, we have 6 interns, so now we have another group of people we can work to death, then you got a problem, which tends to be what I see happening in most internship programs. So how do you make that internship apprentice program a developmental thing? And you need to make sure that the culture is going to allow that to happen. So that to me is a critical piece. As far as recruiting, it seems to me that your best recruitment is all the people that are coming to camp already. If you got high school programs, what's the flyer that you're handing out? Do you get to talk at some point to every high school group? Summer staff, just who are all the people that you can talk to about the idea? Because if you've got over 3 locations, a couple hundred college kids, and then who knows how many high school kids, there's got to be 10 to 12 to 15 to 20 kids in all that group that need whatever you're offering, from a discipleship, year off, break, professional development. That's the other thing I would really challenge folks to think about is, how do we make employment at camp a professional development experience? It's not just about come away to figure yourself out, which can be a part of it, but vocational discernment. There's all kinds of tools for vocational discernment. There's the spiritual development, spiritual formation stuff. But then also, what are the professional skills they're learning to be able to be effective in the workplace? And there's a lot of research on the impact of camp on workplace skill development. So I do some research on that and make sure it's part of your communication strategy, both to the students you're trying to recruit, but also to the parents that got to say yes to taking a break for a year.
Thank you. That was really helpful.
All right. Well, we're at the end of the hour. If there's any questions or comments or discussion you want to have after the hour, and if this is people watching this later and you have questions, please feel free to email myself at rob.ribby@wheaton.edu. Would love to converse with you about this. A couple of resources I want to highlight. First of all, most of this seminar is captured in my book, not just to sell the book, but to provide the resource, Leaders Yet Discovered, available on Amazon. It has a lot of the things like onboarding and supervision, support, what our role is in facilitating learning over the course of summer is there. And then the second resource is master's degree in outdoor adventure leadership here at HoneyRock. If you think this kind of thing and the depth of this kind of thinking and planning is something that you'd like to be equipped in, we encourage you to consider joining us for our master's degree, which you can do from a remote location, stay employed where you are, and participate from a distance. And there's all that explanation on our website. But again, happy to talk to you about that. Next Monday, we're going to have a grad program info session. So after today, you'll get an invitation to join us for that session on Monday. And even if you're just curious, what does it mean? What's it look like? Would invite you to come and hear more about that. Thanks again for joining us today. It's great to see you, especially all those who are former HoneyRockers in the room. Love seeing you guys. Blessings on you all. Have a wonderful day.